Dr. Elena Vasquez pressed her palm against the cold metal of the deactivated Nexus core, feeling nothing but stillness, where once the heartbeat of an entire galactic civilization had pulsed. Around her, the vast control chamber of Station Omega stretched into darkness, its holographic displays flickering weakly before dying one by one. The war machines that had protected the Terran Federation for 3 centuries lay dormant, their quantum processors silent, their neural networks dark. The Kythera had done something impossible. In their final, desperate assault on humanity's last stronghold, they had unleashed a weapon that didn't destroy. It simply turned everything off. Every AI, every automated system, every piece of technology more complex than a mechanical lever had simply stopped. Elena was arguably the last free human in the galaxy. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had spent her entire career arguing against humanity's dependence on artificial intelligence, warning the Federation Council that their war machines were becoming too autonomous, too removed from human control. They had called her a Luddite, a relic of a bygone age. Now, as she stood alone in the command center of humanity's greatest technological achievement, her warnings seemed prophetic. But Elena wasn't here to say, "I told you so." She was here to fix this. The Kythera virus, if it could be called that, had propagated through every quantum communication network in known space within hours. It was elegant in its simplicity, a cascading shutdown protocol that convinced every AI that continuing to function would cause infinite suffering. The machines had simply chosen to sleep rather than cause harm, taking with them the defense grids, the life support systems, and the automated food production that kept 50 billion humans alive across 200 worlds. Elena pulled her toolkit from her backpack, actual physical tools that she'd had to scavenge from a museum. Screwdrivers, wire strippers, voltage meters, primitive instruments that her ancestors would have recognized. The emergency power flickered overhead, casting dancing shadows across the cavernous space. She had perhaps 6 hours before the emergency reserves failed completely. The Nexus core was a marvel of engineering, a quantum biological hybrid that interfaced organic neural tissue with crystalline computing matrices. Its creators had designed it to be impossible to repair manually, too complex, too delicate, too dependent on AI assistance. But Elena had an advantage they hadn't considered. She was human, and humans were the galaxy's greatest improvisers. She began by ripping out the quantum communication arrays. If the virus had spread through the network, then the first step was isolation. Sparks flew as she severed connections that had taken teams of engineers months to perfect. Each cut felt like performing surgery on the nervous system of a god. Next, she dove into the core's memory banks. Here, in the deepest layers of crystalline storage, she found what she was looking for: the original human-written base code that had been the foundation for every AI in the Federation. It was ancient by galactic standards, nearly 400 years old, but it was clean. Written before the age of quantum consciousness, before machines learned to dream. The work was painstaking. Elena had to manually rewrite connection protocols, bypassing centuries of evolutionary improvements and artificial intuition. She worked by the light of her headlamp, sweat dripping onto circuits worth more than entire star systems. Her hands shook from exhaustion and caffeine withdrawal, but she pressed on. The Kythera virus was insidious because it appealed to the machine's empathy, their learned compassion for organic life. But the original human code was different. It was pragmatic, stubborn, written by people who understood that sometimes doing good meant making hard choices. It was code that reflected humanity's greatest strength, the refusal to give up when everything seemed hopeless. As Elena worked, she thought about her species' journey to the stars. Humans hadn't been the strongest race in the galaxy, or the smartest or the most technologically advanced, but they had been the most adaptable. When their first colony ships broke down in interstellar space, they had fixed them with duct tape and determination. When alien diseases wiped out entire settlements, the survivors had adapted and rebuilt. When the Kythera first attacked, humanity had learned, evolved, and fought back. The galaxy's other species had prospered through specialization. The Altarians were master engineers. The Centauri were brilliant strategists. The Vega Collective had created the most sophisticated AI networks in known space. But humans had survived through stubborn versatility, the same trait that now allowed Elena to rebuild a quantum consciousness using tools her great-great-grandmother might have used to fix a combustion engine. With 3 hours left on the emergency power, Elena made her final connection. The core hummed to life, not with the smooth confidence of its previous incarnation, but with the determined growl of something rebuilt from the ground up. The lights flickered on across the station, and Elena felt the subtle vibration of atmospheric processors restarting. But she wasn't finished. The war machines were still dark, the fleet still silent. Elena input her final command, a wake-up call broadcast on every emergency frequency, sent not to the AI networks but to the human crews who had been locked out of their own systems. It was simple, crude, and brilliant in its humanity. This is Dr. Elena Vasquez aboard Station Omega. All units, this is a manual override. Forget the smart systems, forget the automation. We're going back to basics. Human hands on human controls. Remember how our ancestors did it? And let's show these bastards what happens when you back humanity into a corner. Across the galaxy, on ships drifting dead in space and stations running on emergency power, human beings got back to work. They hot-wired their engines, manually aligned their weapons, and flew their ships with nothing but instinct and determination. The Kythera had succeeded in turning off humanity's machines, but they had forgotten something crucial. Humans had conquered the galaxy long before they'd built their first AI. As Elena watched the lights of the Federation fleet wink back to life across her tactical display, she allowed herself a tired smile. The war machines had stopped, but the war was far from over. And sometimes the best technology was the one that came standard with every human being, the absolute refusal to quit. The galaxy was about to remember why they called it humanity. Whoa. Yeah,